Well, the Constitutional Court's ruling ordering political parties to disclose private funders, rights group My Vote Counts, had taken the matter to the highest court in the land to affirm a High Court ruling on the matter. All right, My Vote Counts researcher Zahira Grimwood joins us now via Skype. Thank you very much, Zahira, for joining us.
Having me, and good morning to your viewers.
Well, let's start with a very simple question, really. What does this ruling then mean for the people of South Africa?
Well, now, according to the Constitutional Court, the legislation that was supposed to allow us to access information, the Promotion of Access to Information Act, has to be amended in order to allow for the successful access of information on political parties' private donations, because in the past, while even currently there is no enacted legislation that actually allows for disclosure of political parties' private donations. And now political parties will be obligated to give us this information, and it's regarded, and PI is regarded inconsistent with the Constitution, with the fact that it hasn't been able to give us this, because in the past, civil society organizations have made applications through PIA. We've requested for information on political parties' private donations, even writing letters to parties, writing to Parliament for legislation to be enacted, and they've denied us this information. And now they don't have anywhere to run now that the Concourt has made this ruling. Mm-hmm. But there's also the political party funding bill that is currently at the National Council of Provinces, and that does address a system that will allow for institutions donations, but that is a separate process to the Concourt procedure. And we've one thing that we suspect is that, seeing that we were coming closer to winning when we had our hearing in the Western Cape High Court. It was only at the sharp point of a court order that Parliament decided to take it upon themselves to finally look towards formulating legislation to address this big gap in transparency.
All right. Well, you talk about transparency, and I want to just go back a little bit. I mean, you're a researcher for My Vote Counts. Why did My Vote Counts believe it was essential, really, in the first place, to know where political parties are getting their funding? One could ask, and I suppose the political parties themselves, who've actually not wanted this to happen, they could ask, what business is it really of the general public to know where we're getting our money from?
Well, we are a constitutional democracy which upholds the values of transparency and accountability. And what we've argued in our court case is that if we look at political rights in the Bill of Rights, that should be looked together with Section 32, the right to have access to information. And we're arguing that in order to exercise the right to vote, it can only be effectively exercised if one is able to make an informed vote. So based on the Constitution, Section 32, you have to look at it together with Section 19, which speaks to political rights, as Mogoeng confirmed yesterday. And we have argued that, in the past, with us not being able to have information on political parties' private donations, we've been denied access to a huge chunk of information on what corporations they have, wealthy corporations they have relationships with, and wealthy individuals that have donated to them, and how those wealthy elites have access to resources that is able to influence political parties, and political parties then are then more accountable to big money than what they are to the electorate and the interests of their voters. And then the question comes in of equality. How much does your vote on a ballot paper actually mean if political parties are more accountable to the interests of big money? And that's what we're trying to curb the influence of big money so that your vote counts more.
Yeah. Now, Zahira, it seemed for once that most of the political parties agreed on this one thing, that they didn't want, this information out. They didn't want to have this information open to the public. Is there a possibility that political parties may be hard hit financially? And let me just say why, because I would assume that some funders would now fear donating because, you know, their names will be out there, or the companies' names would be out there. And due to that fear, kind of withhold that money that they would have been donating to those, to their particular political party of choice. Is there a possibility that this will dent the political parties in our country?
Well, we do understand the fact that certain big corporations won't want to be associated with political parties, especially, you know, with all the corruption and the fact that, you know, it would perhaps tarnish certain companies' reputations. But we're also aware of the fact that in the past there have been companies who have disclosed that they do donate to various political parties. I think Anglo Ashanti Gold is one of them, and Standard Bank as well, who have disclosed and who then advance the argument that they are funding based on multi-party democracy and the need for political parties to receive funding because political parties, you know, are pinched when it comes to public funding. And we are aware that there is the threat of certain donors not wanting to donate. But there could also be a situation where the disclosure could allow for the fact that, you know, there'll be companies who will see that there's perhaps a need for donations and then will want to fund based on multi-party democracy. But then you also have to take into consideration, you know, why are donors donating? We'd always think that there must be, you know, perhaps some kind of quid pro quo situation where a donor would want to get something out of donating to a political party. And what we've argued that despite this, the risks to those few wealthy individuals or corporations, the information being out there for the public to have right to access that information in democracy outweighs the threat to a small group of wealthy individuals.
All right, Zahira, thank you very much for this conversation. Interesting indeed. Zahira Grimwood, researcher for My Vote Counts, speaking to us then about that ruling by the Constitutional Court. And of course, we will now know who funds political parties in South Africa. An interesting ruling there, no doubt. All right, moving on.